check this out. Every once in a while here at Fast and Furious Interviews, we got to bring y'all something deep, man. We got to bring y'all something to think about, man. And on today's show, we got a very special guest in the building, TW Brock. Why don't you tell the people who you are and where you from?
Well, once again, my name is TW Brock, and where I'm from all over the world. I mean, literally, and I mean that literally too. I was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but I was raised everywhere. Grew up in New York City, uh, lived in St. Thomas in the Virgin Islands. My mother used to own a wholesale there when I was a little boy. And when I came back from there was talking like this, my grandparents kept asking my mother, what in the world the boy talking about? I can't understand him. Because when I get around my Jamaican friends and when I get around my friends from the islands, you can't tell if I'm from the islands or from right here in America. I lived in the Philippines, and no, I'm not a military brat. I'm just a spoiled.
I don't think I need to ask you how was your childhood. You sound like you had an amazing childhood, man. How was you growing up, bro?
Doc, like I said, my life was quite interesting. But the reason why it was so interesting is because of who my father was. My father was William Bryant Brock, and my story, the story that I have for the audience this evening, is quite interesting. I'd like everyone's help. I'd like y'all to become a pop with me. And most of you are probably thinking to yourselves, what in the world is a pop? You see it on top of the hat? Pop. I'm a pop. Are you?
Okay, what does that mean?
I'm glad you asked. You got it?
Partners of purpose. Explain that.
Well, the reason why I need some partners of purpose is because you see, my father, William Bryant Brock. Please visit the website justiceforbrock.com. My father was the most prominent minority executive at Volkswagen, the automobile company, and in 1977, in July 1977, he was recruited by the company because they opened up their first plant in America in New Stanton, Pennsylvania, and the racism was atrocious. I mean, they would out and out call blacks the N word to their face. They had N word applications for employment. In fact, if you scroll up towards the top on the website there, do you see the blue word right up under the picture of the car? Right beneath the picture of the car, it says abused by VW. Do you see that? Click on that for me. I dare your followers, your readers, to read that aloud. If they do, I guarantee they'll want to trade their cars in. Okay, because this is what minorities would find on their desks when they would come to work in the morning. I was walking through the neighborhood today and I saw all these jokers. They had a block rally, driving around in their Porsches and their Audi A8s, and uh, I mean, if they only knew what blacks endured at that plant, at the Volkswagen plant. Volkswagen makes Audi, Porsche, Lamborghini, Bentley, Bugatti. That's a $19.5 million automobile.
Let me ask you this because I'm looking at this and it say nigger application. Does that say application
That's right.
for what was that employment or whatever?
Yes, sir.
So they actually had the word nigger
Yes.
on the Volkswagen. On Volkswagens.
No, on Volkswagen employees' desks. That letter that you're looking at, blacks would find this on their desks at work at the plant when they came to work at that plant, at the first plant here in the United States in New Stanton, Pennsylvania.
So that wasn't like company issued. That was like a bad fucking joke or something like that.
Well, if you call that a joke, I call it an insult. I mean, they had black dolls hanging from nooses over the doors of blacks' offices. The few blacks that worked at that plant, that's what they had to endure. Okay, they had at that plant, they had they would put dead rats and dead snakes in people's desk drawers, and blacks would come to work and find this on their desks. Okay. Go back to the website.
That's
Go
not
back to the website. Go back to the website for me. Let me show you something else.
so. How did your father become an employee of a racist company like that?
Okay, before I go to what the next thing I was going to show you, I'll show you. Go to the. You see the blue link that says recruited?
Up top.
Yes, sir. Right up, right down. Come down, come down. Right there.
Yep.
Recruited. Click on that for me. So this is a letter that m- m- uh, that I found in my father's belongings. You know, when my father died, his office was broken into, and his briefcase was stolen. What the company wasn't aware of is that because they were making threats on his life, he made copies of everything and gave them to different members of the family. So when I became of age, they just gave it to me. Back in those days, they didn't have websites, so websites weren't available to put this on a website back then. But this letter says, in the summer and early fall of 1977, Volkswagen Westmoreland was experiencing tumultuous times related to the black community. Let's see, the Pittsburgh Courier, a local black newspaper, leveled attacks on Volkswagen Westmoreland's hiring practices as black community leaders threatened boycotts and led marches and pray-ins at the plant gates. In July 1977, I was recruited by and accepted the position of Equal Employment Opportunity Coordinator. While in that job, I argued for and secured a change in the controversial recruiting district availability to include Pittsburgh. This, along with the solid communication link with the people through appearances on television, radio, at public gatherings, and newspaper reports, etc., eased tension. The most measurable result was a 10% minority representation on the workforce and a screeching halt in public outcries and demonstrations against Volkswagen by the press, the black community, and government agencies. These accomplishments did, however, have their price. The clearly defined position of most members of management was anti affirmative action. It was also anti Pittsburgh, anti community groups, etc. It was this way, even though I'd been hired with the promise that I'd be drafting a good, solid affirmative action plan and support it with a personnel department and staff bent on equal employment opportunity. In maneuvering these antis and pointing out serious pitfalls along the way, I gained substantial disfavor at the middle management level, but was led to believe that upper management appreciated my efforts. Out of the clear blue sky in May 1978, I was told I was being transferred to production for career development for 6 to 8 months because I needed to better understand the business in order to move up the ladder to success and influence. There was considerable public outcry and suspicion of foul play. I too was a little concerned, but when Volkswagen Westmoreland wrote articles in Pittsburgh and Washington, Pennsylvania newspapers saying, in effect, there was nothing to fear, I was on my way up, not out, even though I'd been put to work for Arnold Pruitt, a man reputed by some as being the most racist individual in all of Volkswagen America, fears were rested. How many major companies like Volkswagen? Do you understand? Volkswagen is the largest auto manufacturer in the world. How many major companies like this write articles in the newspaper to demote or promote someone? I'm really proud of my father.
All right. So those are words from your father right there, right?
Yeah, well let me get these last two paragraphs in, man. I just got to get these last two paragraphs in the second page. So my father writes, several months elapsed and I gained substantial disfavor at the middle management level, was led to believe his upper management appreciated my efforts. Suddenly, Richard Cummings, who I considered a friendly protector, quit and went on to bigger and better horizons. I realized with his leaving, my latitude, success, and influence could be turning into the sliding board of uh, the sliding board to the cesspool of retaliation and vengeance against me. After all, many saw my initial move to production as a chance to get me, and with Mr. Cummins gone, I had buried there and forgotten about. Uh, the second paragraph, this is actually my favorite paragraph on the second page here. It says here, I wasted no haste in making it empathetically clear that I wanted out of production and into a job more suited to my background and interests. I'd come from writing speeches for Vice President Short, flying on the company jet, appearing on television and radio and print, etc., to carrying a lunch bag among second shift mice on a dull and uninteresting assembly line. It was nice to visit, but I didn't want to live there. I mean, my father wrote speeches for the vice president of Volkswagen when he was 27 years old. He flew on the company gave him a private jet to fly him back and forth to Germany at 27 years old.
All right. So let's go back a little bit.
Certainly.
How did your father begin to get the job at Volkswagen? What led him up to doing it, and what was the concerns in the house?
Well, you see, when Volkswagen opened up their first plant here in the United States, um, the racism was atrocious. As I stated earlier, they would out and out call blacks the N word to their faces. They would find the N word applications for employment on their desks. They would put dead rats and snakes in their desk drawers. Um, Come with me back to the website. Go back up towards the top a little bit. You see the blue link right next to the abuse by VW, the one that says a decision at VW, then suicide. Okay, that's my father right there in the lower left hand corner. He was 31 years old when he was murdered. Scroll down to the second page for me, if you will. After Brock's reunion with Penn on Friday, the men talked about their experiences at Volkswagen and why, after more than a year of negotiations that appear to be bearing fruit, a lawsuit was filed. Penn pulled a picture from a large folder filled with hate literature he said was found at the plant. The picture was of a bomb that turned out to be fake, which nonetheless chilled both him and his family. The bomb was found in his desk drawer at work in November. Later, a telephone caller said, "Hey, I won't repeat that word. Next time it'll be a real one." Why is it that you can tear the internet apart, but you can't find that newspaper article anywhere else online but this website?
Wow, that's crazy, man. So what? Why do you think your father stayed at Volkswagen?
Because he fought for the civil rights. He was a man like me. He was a man on fire. He was a man who believed what the Bible says, that I can do all things through Christ Jesus who strengthens me. He was a man that believed that his people would stand with him. The unfortunate thing is when he died, they stood down. They did nothing.
So let me ask you this, right? Your father's working at the plant. He was working at a different, like maybe in the offices, and then they sent him to the plant, to the
No,
floor.
no, no. Here, let me tell you the story. Okay, the story is that when they opened up that first plant here in the United States, uh, um, the governor of the state of Pennsylvania was an associate of my father's, um, and he told Volkswagen that if they didn't hire Mr. Brock, they wouldn't have a plant in his state. Okay, so Volkswagen sent a limo to my father's job, took him to dinner, and made him a job offer. They hired him on as an EEOC coordinator, which means his job was to hire and fire. So initially, Bill Brock begins hiring from the black community. So then the company tells him flat out, "Don't you worry about them other blacks. We're going to take good care of you." But you see, my father was a man of integrity. Okay. Back in those days, they didn't have what you call at will states where they could fire you at will. You had to have a paper trail to fire someone. And prior to going to work for them, my father worked for the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission. Okay. And so therefore he knew the employment laws inside out. Nothing they could do about his hiring practices. And back in those days, you had to have a minimum of 3 write-ups to fire someone. So then the company called themselves promoting him to a position they thought he couldn't handle so they could legally terminate. So when my father was just 27 years old, they promoted him to vehicle shipping coordinator, which means his new job was then to map out the cheapest route to get the product from the plant to every dealer in the United States, including Hawaii. I guess they figured a 27-year-old black man with no training in that area wouldn't do too well. Or if the idiots had done their homework prior to promoting him, they would have discovered that Mr. Brock was a genius. And I mean that literally, not figuratively, okay? Because he graduated high school at 16 years old with a 4.0 GPA. He went to college on a full academic scholarship, graduated from college at 21 with a 4.0 GPA. While in college, he taught probability and statistics as a hobby. So you see, numbers was his game. So when they promoted him to vehicle shipping coordinator, they were actually doing themselves a favor and him because numbers was his game. I mean, my father used to do numbers in his head that most people need a calculator for. So therefore, he saved the company several $1,000,000 a month. That got him featured in the Wall Street Journal, the Boston Globe, the New York Times, the Philadelphia Inquirer, Jet, Ebony, and every other major magazine you could think of. So the Germans overseas loved my father. That's where you read and you saw it on company letterhead already. That they Gave my father a private jet to fly him back and forth to Germany, a company car, and 3 secretaries when he was 27. You with me? So then the Germans at the plant, well, they didn't like my father too tough because everything that he did backfired in their face. You follow me? And so the blacks formed a caucus and made my father president and spokesperson of the Black Caucus. So while he's negotiating for the company to make concessions for other blacks, things like better positions, more money, less discrimination, the company would agree to certain terms behind closed doors. But then when my father would call a general meeting with the rest of the caucus members, the company would deny those terms. We didn't say that. That's not true. He lied to you. Well, if you know anything about black folk, it's been my unfortunate experience that we have a hard time sticking together. So the other blacks call my father a sellout and everything else. But my thing is, if my father were a sellout, I have but one question for you, and only one. If he were a sellout, how in the world did you get hired at a company that wasn't hiring black folk in the first damn place? But black folks don't think. So the other blacks went behind my father's back and filed a $70 million class action discrimination lawsuit against the company. Well, you see, when they filed that lawsuit, it caused panic among upper management at the plant because my father originally worked in personnel. When he worked in personnel, he wrote the company's equal employment opportunity policy. Therefore, he knew where they were breaking the law. He was the president of the NAACP, uh, and he knew the employment laws, and he was running for mayor in the city in which he resided. So he had enough information to put VW out of business in the U.S. And as I stated earlier, because Volkswagen owns Audi, Porsche, Lamborghini, Bentley, Bugatti, that's a $19.5 million automobile for one car. They didn't kill him for the money. I mean, think about it. 5 Bugattis, there's your $70 million right there. Just 5. Okay. They sell these their products all over the country. Okay. And these several different brands, hell, if my father would have put them out of business in the US, it would have cost the company trillions of dollars. In fact, do me a favor. Go back to the website real quick. I'm gonna show you something real quick. Pull this up for me. Right there you go. See it right there. Impact unfavorably. Click on that one. That's a letter my father wrote to the president of Volkswagen. This is the reason why my father was killed. This is a letter my father wrote to the president of Volkswagen a few months before he died. So when the blacks filed that lawsuit and uh, uh, Volkswagen tried to blackmail my father with the unfavorable, with the false information, the made up information, and because he wouldn't back down, remember he wrote this letter. Let's see, in September. He died in January. So this is what, about 5 months before he died. So let's pick it up from the your followers can read it whenever they want, but I'm going to pick it up from the first the second paragraph on the second page. So my father writes to, let me see. He writes, while the nobler motive will ultimately be served via this effort, we are faced with the reality that our civil rights have been grossly violated. And let's see. Our civil rights have been grossly violated, and no apparent voluntary redress is in sight. We know nothing of your interest in human rights and can only remind you that in America, equal employment opportunity is the law. Our humblest and most sincere request is that you do not misconstrue this advice as either an attempt to strong arm Volkswagen into some self serving, undeserved reaction or as idle conversation not to be followed by consistent action. The parties signatory to this and enclosed memos feel that our injuries have been great enough to warrant risking everything and anything to get justice. Understand, they're threatening his life at this point. You follow me?
Yep.
Okay. We would like nothing more than to have our problems and those of the organization with us aired and resolved within the confines of the VW family house. However, the pains and anxiety of the struggle has reached an explosive ebb. Our intent is to await a direct response from you only as long as we realistically can, considering the circumstances involved. Now, here's where it gets deep. We feel we have no choice but to bring local, national, and international attention to the matter through a lawsuit for not only Volkswagen's millions, but for the concession that it be required to cease and desist from building and or selling cars in the United States of America and be barred from ever doing so again as long as either shall exist. My dear brother, if he had succeeded, it would have cost the company trillions of dollars.
Mm. So let me ask you this, because it seemed like your father was pretty famous in his region. So how could somebody not get a full investigation as far as being killed or suicide? How could that happen where nobody questions what exactly happened?
Because they swept it under the rug. Because there's not enough of us talking about it. Because if they if I were killed and you didn't have the balls to back it up see, here's the thing. The blacks at the plant when my father was killed, they stood down. That $70 million class action discrimination lawsuit went away because it accomplished what they had what they wanted to happen. But see, what they failed to realize is that would have been the best time to press through, because they can't kill us all. Because the next person that dies, you know what happens? The FBI, whether they want to or not, they're forced to get up off their ass and do something. Because if too many people die, then and you got a you got a trend, you got something going on here, and the FBI and the local police ain't gonna do something about it. You damn right, the FBI has to get involved.
But let me ask you this, because your father didn't start that lawsuit, right?
No, sir.
Can you tell us about how the lawsuit started?
What I know, I can only tell you what I know, brother, because I understand when this went down, I wasn't even in the picture. I was 13 years old, and the reason why I'm so passionate about this, okay, I never met my father. Okay, my mother lied to me when I was a kid. My mother and father, dated while they were in high school, and my mother lied to me and told me some other cat was my father. And the other cat, she lied to him too. She told him he was my father. And he found out the truth when I was 10. But my father was still alive then, but he didn't tell me the truth till I was 16, 3 years after my father had already died.
Wow, that's a powerful story, man. Why do you think that happened?
Dude, it bothers the hell out of me because my mother was a selfish woman. My mother was, at the time when my mother and father dated when they were in high school, and you know how kids they were only kids. My mother was 15 when she got pregnant with me. My father was 16, a year older than her, and my mother fell in love with the guy who I thought was my father for all those years, and um, that guy was he was an amazing father. I can remember him. I can remember as a kid, doing wrong, and he would say, "You're about to get a beating," and I say, "Yeah." I try to play dumb as most kids do. I want to get a beating. He said, "You know why you're getting a beating?" I say, "No," and he said, "Well, let's talk about it." And we talk about it, and he take me through the whole story. What did I tell you to do? Yeah, you told me to do ABC. Well, what did you do? I did CBD. And I told you to do about what time? Well, you told me to do about 2 o'clock. And what time is it now? 6:30. So after I'm thinking I didn't talk myself out of it, right? After everything, after we talked it all the way through, he said, "Now turn around, and take your pants down." Oh man! So he was an amazing father to me. I got mad respect for this man because he didn't have to be there the way he was as a father, but he was, and he was an amazing human being, you know. And when I found out the truth, like I said, I was 16 years old, and the way it worked was when I came back when we moved back to the States from overseas, I lived in New York City with my mother, and he lived in D.C. Well, he lived in Maryland, and every weekend I would fly from New York City to DC to meet with him, to spend the weekend with him. And I never forget this one weekend, his car broke down, so he couldn't pick me up from the airport. And so we understood that he would pick me up next week, no big deal. And the following week, he didn't have the money to get his car fixed, so he couldn't get it fixed. Couldn't no couldn't make it happen. And um and then like 3 weeks had gone by, and in that time frame in my life, my mother was dating one of the biggest dope dealers in New York City. And so uh on the third week, when he couldn't pick me up, um he was told, my mother said, well, look, just go to any car dealer you want, and we'll just buy you a new car, and you pick up your son from the airport. And he said, I'm not letting another man pick me, buy me a car. He's just gonna have to wait till I get my car fixed. And you know, my mother gave him an earpiece, and she hung up the phone in his ear. And then I called him back, and I gave him an earpiece, and I hung up the phone. And because I was upset, I wanted to see my dad, you know. And he called me back about 15 minutes later, and he said, I want to tell you a secret. I said, what's up? He said, I'm not your real father. Your real father committed suicide. And I'm like, man, what? I thought he was full of crap. I thought he just made it up. So he said, no, it's the truth. Your mom never wanted to tell you the truth. He said, but I'm telling you the truth. I said, okay, whatever. And I got off the phone with him, and I went in my mother's room. And my mother and I, we never really got along, because I looked more like, my father, Billy. And she, they had a bad, I don't know how their relationship went, because we never talked about it. But um, but I never felt love from my mother because of the relationship. I knew now, I knew then, that uh why, but I didn't know all my life. I couldn't figure it out. But I look like my father. So um we didn't have the greatest relationship. And the reason why I moved all around the globe is because my father hired a private detective to find me. I learned that later. Um, but he wanted to be a part of my life. My mother told me once. She said the one thing that she hated more than anything in the world, the one thing that she regretted, is my father went to her before his mother died, and he told her that his mother was dying, and she really wanted to meet her grandson. And my mother told him no. She said she regrets that, but her actions don't depict that even to this day.
Let me ask you this though, man. How does a kid that graduate high school at 16 years old, how does he have a child, bro?
Bruh, you don't you don't I mean, bruh, how do kids in today's culture have children?
No, but the reason why I said that, because I'm pretty sure if he graduated high school earlier, like colleges was like recruiting him and talking to him. Why do you think him and your mom stopped like messing around or
I don't
stop
want to talk
acting
about
out?
that. I don't know.
Right.
I don't want to. I can't give you. That wasn't my life, so I don't know. I can't tell you that. And my mother and I aren't close because I look like him.
She never told you any stories about.
Well, like I said, when I found out the truth from the guy I thought was my father, I did approach her. I said, "Hey, mom, and she said, "Boy, can't you leave me alone? Can't you see I'm asleep?" I said, "Okay, well, when you wake up, I want to hear about the secret you've been hiding from me for the last 16 years." And she woke up immediately. She told me to come here, and I said, "What's up?" And she said, "Tell me what you know." And I said, "Well, he told me, and I won't be using names here, um, but I said he told me that he's not my real father, and my real father committed suicide."